Bible in a Year, the Message Version, July 19. 1 Chronicles, chapter 28, verse 1 through chapter 29, verse 30. David called together all the leaders of Israel, tribal administrators, head of various governmental operations, military commanders and captains, stewards in charge of the property and livestock belonging to the king and his sons, everyone who held responsible positions in the kingdom. King David stood tall and spoke, "Listen to me, my people. I fully intended to build a permanent structure for the chest of the covenant of God, God's footstool. But when I got ready to build it, God said to me, 'You may not build the house to honor me. You've done too much fighting, killed too many people.' God chose me out of my family to be king over Israel forever. First, he chose Judah as the lead tribe. Then he narrowed it down to my family. And finally, he picked me from my father's sons, pleased to make me the king over all Israel. And then, from all my sons, and God gave me many, he chose my son Solomon to sit on the throne of God's rule over Israel. He went on to say, 'Your son Solomon will build my house and my courts. I have chosen him to be my royal adopted son, and I will be to him a father. I will guarantee that his kingdom will last if he continues to be as strong-minded in doing what I command and carrying out my decisions as he is doing now.' And now, in this public place, all Israel looking on and God listening in, as God's people obey and study every last one of the commandments of your God so that you can make the most of living in this good land and pass it on intact to your children, ensuring a good future. And you, Solomon, my son, get to know well your father's God. Serve him with a whole heart and eager mind, for God examines every heart and sees through every motive. If you seek him, he'll make sure you find him. But if you abandon him, he'll leave you for good. Look sharp now. God has chosen you to build his holy house. Be brave, determined, and do it." Then David presented his son Solomon with the plans for the temple complex, porch, storerooms, meeting rooms, and the place for atoning sacrifice. He turned over the plans for everything that God's Spirit had brought to his mind: the design of the courtyards, the arrangement of the rooms, and the closets for storing all the holy things. He gave him his plan for organizing the Levites and priests in their work of leading and ordering worship in the house of God, and for caring for the liturgical furnishings. He provided exact specifications for how much gold and silver was needed for each article used in the service of worship: the gold and silver lampstands and lamps, the gold tables for consecrated bread, the silver tables, the gold forks, the bowls and the jars, and the incense altar. And he gave him the plan for sculpting the cherubs with the wings outstretched over the chest of the covenant of God, the cherub throne. Here are the blueprints for the whole project as God gave me to understand it, David said. David continued to address Solomon. Take charge. Take heart. Don't be anxious or get discouraged. God, my God, is with you in this. He won't walk off and leave you in the lurch. He's at your side. Every last detail is completed for conducting the worship of God. You have all the priests and Levites standing ready to pitch in, and skillful craftsmen and artisans of every kind ready to go to work. Both leaders and people are ready. Just say the word." Then David, the king, addressed the congregation. My son Solomon was singled out and chosen by God to do this, but he's young and untested, and the work is huge. This is not just a place for people to meet each other, but a house for God to meet us. I've done my best to get everything together for building this house for my God. All the materials necessary: gold, silver, bronze, iron, lumber, precious and varied colored stones, and building stones, vast stockpiles. Furthermore, because my heart is in this, in addition to and beyond what I have gathered, I'm turning over my personal fortune of gold and silver for making this place of worship for my God. 3,000 talents, about 113 tons of gold, all from Orpha, the best, and 7,000 talents, 214 tons of silver for covering the walls of the buildings, and for the gold and silver work by craftsmen and artisan. And now, how about you? Who among you is ready and willing to join in the giving? Ready and willing, the heads of families, leaders of the tribes of Israel, commanders and captains in the army, stewards of the king's affairs, stepped forward and gave willingly. They gave 5,000 talents, 188 tons, and 10,000 darics, 185 pounds of gold, 10,000 talents of silver, 377 tons, 18,000 talents of bronze, 679 tons, and 100,000 talents, 3,775 tons of iron. Anyone who had precious jewels put them in the treasury for the building of the temple of God in custody of Jahel the Gershonite. And the people were full of a sense of celebration, all that giving, and all given willingly, freely. King David was exuberant. David blessed God in full view of the entire congregation. Blessed are you, God of Israel, our Father, from of old and forever. To you, O God, belong the greatness and the might, the glory, the victory, the majesty, the splendor. Yes, everything in heaven, everything on earth, the kingdom, all yours. You've raised yourself high over all. Riches and glory come from you. You're ruler over all. You hold strength and power in the palm of your hand to build up and strengthen all. And here we are, O God, our God, giving thanks to you, praising your splendid name. But me, who am I, and who are these my people, that we should presume to be giving something to you? Everything comes from you. All we're doing is giving back what you've been giving from your generous hand. As far as you're concerned, we're homeless, shiftless wanderers like our ancestors. Our lives mere shadows, hardly anything to us. God, our God, all these materials, these piles of stuff for building a house of worship for you, honoring your holy name, it all came from you. It was all yours in the first place. I know, dear God, that you care nothing for the surface. You want us, our true selves, and so I have given from the heart, honestly and happily. And now see all these people doing the same, giving freely, willingly. What a joy! O God, God of our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, keep this generation generous and the spirit of generosity alive forever in these people always. Keep their hearts set firm in you, and give my son Solomon an uncluttered and focused heart so that he can obey what you command, live by your directions and counsel, and carry through with building the temple for which I have provided." David then addressed the congregation. "Bless God, your God." And they did it, blessed God, the God of their ancestors, and worshiped reverently in the presence of God and the king. The very next day, they butchered the sacrificial animals and offered in the worship of Israel to God 1,000 bulls, 1,000 rams, 1,000 sheep, and in addition, drink offerings and many other sacrifices. They feasted all day, eating and drinking before God, exuberant with joy. Then they ceremonially reenacted Solomon's coronation, anointing David's son before God as their leader, and Zadok as priest. Solomon sat on the throne of God as king in place of David his father, and everything went well. All Israel obeyed him. All the leaders of the people, including all the sons of King David, accepted Solomon as their king and promised their loyalty. Solomon rode high on a crest of popular acclaim. It was all God's doing. God gave him position and honor beyond any king in Israel before him. David, son of Jesse, ruled over all Israel. He was king for 40 years. He ruled from Hebron 7 years, and from Jerusalem 33. He died at a ripe old age, full of days, wealth, and glory. His son Solomon ruled after him. The history of David, the king, from start to finish, is written in the Chronicles of Samuel the seer, Nathan the prophet, and Gad the seer, including a full account of his rule, his exploits, and the times through which he and Israel and the surrounding kingdoms passed. Romans chapter 5, verse 6 through verse 21. Christ arrives right on time to make this happen. He didn't, and doesn't, wait for us to get ready. He presented himself for this sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyway. We can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for, and we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to selfless sacrifice. But God put his love on the line for us by offering his son in sacrificial death while we were of no use whatever to him. Now that we are set right with God by means of this sacrificial death, the consummated blood sacrifice, there is no longer a question of being at odds with God in any way. If, when we were at our worst, we were put on friendly terms with God by the sacrificial death of his Son, now that we are at best, just think of how our lives will expand and deepen by means of his resurrection life. Now that we have actually received this amazing friendship with God, we are no longer content to simply say it, plodding prose. We sing and shout our praises to God through Jesus, the Messiah. You know the story of how Adam landed us in the dilemma we're in: first sin, then death, and no one exempt from either sin or death. That sin disturbed relationship with God in everything and everyone, but the extent of the disturbance was not clear until God spelled it out in detail to Moses. So death, this huge abyss separating us from God, dominated the landscape from Adam to Moses. Even those who didn't sin precisely as Adam did by disobeying a specific command of God, still had to experience this termination of life, this separation from God. But Adam, who got us into this, also points ahead to the one who will get us out of it. Yet, the rescuing gift is not exactly parallel to the death dealing sin. If one man's sin put crowds of people at the dead end abyss of separation from God, just think what God's gift poured through one man, Jesus Christ, will do. There's no comparison between that death dealing sin and this generous, life giving gift. The verdict on that one sin was the death sentence. The verdict on the many sins that followed was this wonderful life sentence. If death got the upper hand through one man's wrongdoing, can you imagine the breathtaking recovery life makes, absolute life, in those who grasp with both hands this wildly extravagant life gift, this grand setting everything right that the one man Jesus Christ provides? Here it is in a nutshell. Just as one person did it wrong and got us all this trouble with sin and death, another person did it right and got us out of it. But more than just getting us out of trouble, he got us into life. One man said no to God and put many people in the wrong. One man said yes to God and put many in the right. All that passing laws against sin did was produce more lawbreakers. But sin didn't and doesn't have a chance in competition with the aggressive forgiveness we call grace. When it's sin versus grace, grace wins hands down. All sin can do is threaten us with death. And that's the end of it. Grace, because God is putting everything together again through the Messiah, invites us into life, a life that goes on and on and on, world without end. Psalm chapter 15, verse 1 through verse 5, a David psalm. God, who gets invited to dinner at your place? How do we get in on your guest list? Walk straight, act right, tell the truth. Don't hurt your friend. Don't blame your neighbor. Despise the despicable. Keep your word even when it costs you. Make an honest living. Never take a bribe. You'll never get blacklisted if you live like this. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 18 through verse 19. Discipline your children while you still have the chance. Indulging them destroys them. Let angry people endure the backlash of their own anger. If you try to make it better, you'll only make it worse. This was the daily reading for July 19.